Sorry, this table's for family only, my brother smirked, pointing toward a fold-out chair by the trash can. Everyone laughed as I sat alone. Then the bill arrived, $3,200. The waiter looked at me. I just smiled and said, "Not my table." My name's Sam. I'm 34 years old, and I guess if I had to sum myself up, I've always been the dependable one in the family. Not the favorite, not the troublemaker, definitely not the golden child, just the guy who shows up when he says he will, pays his bills on time, and never forgets a birthday. I've built a quiet life for myself. I work in finance, live alone, and I tend to keep to myself. I don't stir the pot. Now, my family, they're loud, the kind of tight-knit that looks good from the outside but feels more like a performance. They're experts at acting like everything's perfect, even when it's clearly not. I've always felt like I was orbiting around them, close enough to be involved, but never really included. I was the guy who got an invite to the wedding but was somehow never in any of the pictures. Growing up, my brother Dylan was the one who shined. He had that bold charm, reckless and magnetic, and he was always in some kind of mess, but somehow he always came out of it just fine. My parents ate it up like it was their favorite show. Even when he dropped out of college, lost 2 jobs in a row, and moved back in at 28, they still talked about him like he was destined for greatness. Meanwhile, I paid my own way through school, kept the same job for over 10 years, and even chipped in on their mortgage when Dad's hours got slashed. But none of that ever really earned me any kind of special recognition, not enough to feel like I truly had a place at the head of the table, so to speak. Still, I told myself not to let it bother me. I kept things running in the background, sent the checks, answered the group texts, showed up for every holiday, and smiled through all the backhanded comments disguised as jokes. "Sam, you're too serious. Loosen up, man, it's just a party." Or, "Oh, we figured you'd be busy. You're always working." I laughed it off, kept my cool. Part of me held on to this quiet hope that if I just kept showing up, eventually I'd feel like part of the family, not just the guy footing the bills behind the scenes. That hope? It fell apart last fall. It all started with a dinner. Dylan had just gotten engaged to this woman named Sophie, who my mom immediately labeled an absolute angel. Like she was heaven sent. My parents decided to host a big engagement dinner at this upscale rooftop spot downtown. Way fancier than anything they usually spring for, which, looking back, probably should have raised a flag. Then I got a call from my mom. "Sam, sweetheart," she said, using that sweet, overly affectionate voice she breaks out when she wants something. "We'd love for you to come to Dylan and Sophie's engagement dinner. It's going to be such a special night." Of course I said yes right away. "Just send me the details," I told her. Then she added, softer this time, "And if it's not too much trouble, we were hoping you could help out with the reservation. Just to put it on hold. We'll pay you back, obviously." I should have known right then and there that "we'll pay you back" really meant "we won't." But like always, I agreed. I called the restaurant, booked a private room for 20 guests, and handed over my credit card for the deposit. Honestly, I didn't mind. It was Dylan's celebration. And maybe, just maybe, this time I'd feel like I was truly part of something. The night of the dinner, I showed up right on time. 7 sharp. I wore a dark navy suit, crisp shirt, and a fresh pair of cufflinks I'd been saving for a good occasion. I brought a nice bottle of champagne for the couple and even made a personalized card with their initials on the front. When I got to the rooftop, the hostess nodded politely and directed me to the private section. I took a breath and stepped in. The space was stunning, string lights overhead, elegant floral arrangements on the tables, and a little jazz band playing off in the corner. And there they were. My parents, Dylan, Sophie, her family, a few of their friends. Everyone already had drinks, chatting and laughing like the evening was already in full swing. I smiled and headed over, expecting at least a wave or a welcome. But Dylan just looked up with that same smug grin he's always had. "Oh, hey," he said, barely glancing at the champagne in my hand. "Glad you made it." Then he pointed to a fold-out chair off to the side, set near a trash can of all places. "Sorry, this table's for family only," he added, fake sympathy dripping from his voice. "But there's a seat for you right over there." I actually blinked, thinking it had to be some kind of joke. I looked over at Mom. She just gave me that tight, polite smile she uses when she doesn't want to intervene. Dad let out a weird little chuckle and raised his glass. Sophie didn't even acknowledge me. Then, like it was some choreographed scene, a few people laughed. I stood there for a beat too long. I wanted to speak, anything, but my throat tightened up. My ears felt hot. It took me back to being 13, left out of a cousin's wedding photo because I didn't match the vibe. So I walked to the chair, set the champagne down beside me on the floor, and sat. I didn't even take off my coat. A waiter stopped by and asked if I was with the party. I nodded quietly. He didn't press. Just handed me a glass of water and moved on. I sat there for nearly 2 hours while they laughed, toasted, opened presents. Dylan gave this long speech about how lucky he was to be surrounded by the people who mattered most. I watched Mom tear up when Sophie called her the best future mother-in-law a girl could ask for. No one offered me a menu. No one even asked if I'd eaten. Eventually dessert came out, this fancy multi-layered cake with edible gold flakes. The band played something slow and sweet. The sun started dipping behind the skyline. And it hit me, no one had looked in my direction for at least half an hour. Then the check arrived. I saw the waiter approach their table with that little leather folder. He scanned the group, then looked down at the credit card on file. My card. I watched him step toward me. "Excuse me, sir," he said quietly. "The total for the evening is $3,218. Would you like me to charge the same card?" Every head turned. Dylan raised an eyebrow and said casually, "Oh yeah, Sam's got it." The waiter looked at me. And I smiled, calm, slow, deliberate. My voice didn't shake. "Not my table," I said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "I was told this one's for family only." You could have heard a pin drop. The air seemed to split in half. Dylan's mouth hung open. Mom looked confused. Dad sat up straighter. Sophie's dad furrowed his brow. The waiter hesitated. "Sir, you made the reservation?" "I did," I said with a nod. "And I paid the deposit. But I'm not with them." I was over at the side table, the one by the trash can. I stood up slowly, slipped on my coat, and nodded in that direction. "Right over there," I said. "Where I apparently belong." You could practically hear the collective gasp. For a moment, nobody said a word. The waiter looked like he wanted to vanish, standing there between the tables holding the check like it might explode. Dylan's face twisted, like he'd just been slapped with a dead fish. Mom's eyes narrowed, darting back and forth between me and the bill, clearly trying to figure out how things had unraveled so quickly. "Wait, Sam," she said, voice low and a little unsteady. "What are you doing?" I gave a small shrug. "Just sticking to the seating plan, Mom. Dylan had told me the table was for family only. So I figured I wasn't included." I glanced at the waiter. "I didn't eat anything. Didn't drink. Wasn't exactly welcomed. So I'm not paying." Dylan scoffed, the smirk dropping into something colder. "Don't be ridiculous," he said sharply. "It was just a joke, man. Lighten up. You always take things so personally." The whole room went still. Even the jazz band seemed to trail off into an awkward silence. All eyes were locked on me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small under the weight of it. "Yeah," I said, slow and deliberate. "That's the problem, isn't it? Everything's a joke to you, as long as someone else is the punchline." Sophie looked confused, like she was just starting to realize something real was going down. Her dad, this stiff guy in a blazer who hadn't said 10 words all night, suddenly leaned forward. "You invited this man to your engagement dinner," he said to Dylan, "and sat him next to the trash can?" His voice was sharp, full of disbelief. Dylan rolled his eyes and turned to Mom for support. She straightened her posture, gave a tight smile. "Let's not overreact," she said. "Sam's just being dramatic." She always defaulted to that, just dramatic, just tired, just sensitive. It was her go-to excuse to explain away anything that made her uncomfortable. It had always been like that. He's just being sensitive. He's just having a moment. He's just overthinking. Anything to avoid saying, "Yes, that was cruel. Yes, we let it happen." The waiter cleared his throat gently. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but we do need to process the payment to close out the space. If we're not using the card on file, I'll need another form." Silence. I turned and started walking toward the elevator. That's when Dad spoke up. "Sam, come on," he said. "You already paid the deposit. You might as well just finish it." I stopped. Dead in my tracks. That phrase, "might as well," hit me like a hammer. Something snapped. I turned around. "You're right," I said. "I did pay the deposit. I called 3 restaurants to find one with a rooftop view, just like Dylan wanted. I scheduled the date around his football games. I ordered custom flowers because Mom said the fake ones would look cheap in the pictures. I put down a $500 non-refundable deposit without even flinching. And I showed up, on time, alone, dressed in a suit, just to support my brother. I took a few steps closer, my voice lower now, but still clear enough for everyone to hear. And what did I get in return? A folding chair next to a trash can. And a "sorry, this table's for family only." I turned to Dylan. "So now? You figure it out. You and your real family?" Dylan's face went red, color creeping up from his collar. He stood up, chest puffed out like he was ready to square up, but it just made him look smaller somehow. "You're making a scene," he snapped. "No," I said. "I'm drawing a line." And then I turned and walked away. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs, each step heavy with adrenaline and this weird disbelief that I'd actually gone through with it. Outside, the air was cool and sharp against my face. I loosened my tie and just kept walking. I didn't know where I was heading, but I knew for sure I wasn't going back. At the time, I figured that was it. A dramatic exit, a few uncomfortable conversations later, and maybe they'd sweep it under the rug like always. What I didn't know then was how far the consequences of that moment would ripple. It wasn't until later that night, still in my suit, still clutching that unopened champagne bottle like it meant something, that my phone lit up. First, a text from Dylan. "Dude, seriously? You couldn't have just paid and talked to me after?" Then another. "You embarrassed Mom in front of Sophie's whole family. Was that your goal? Revenge?" And then, a phone call. Unknown number. It was Sophie. "Hi," she said. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I know we don't really talk, but can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, cautious. "Did you really pay for everything? The deposit? The flowers? All of it?" I paused. "Yeah," I said finally. There was a quiet moment on her end. "They told my dad you offered," she said. "That it was your idea." That stopped me cold. "I didn't offer," I said slowly. "They asked?" I said yes. I wasn't expecting anything back, but I sure as hell didn't do it to show off. Sophie let out a breath. "Well," she said, "my dad's livid. He thought it was a generous gesture from you. Now he's saying he never would have agreed to that restaurant if he'd known the person footing the bill would be seated by a garbage can." I didn't say anything. "He said Dylan and your parents made him look like an idiot." Another pause. "I'm not calling to stir anything up," she added quickly. "I just figured you should know." I thanked her, and we hung up. But that was just the beginning. In the days that followed, everything escalated way faster than I'd expected, and not in the way my family probably thought it would. It started with the group text. You know the one, the big family thread that usually only pings on birthdays and holidays. Lots of recycled memes, blurry cake pics, and endless "Happy Friday" messages. A text from my aunt popped up. The first anyone had said since that night. "Mom, Sam, we need to talk. Call me when you get a chance. Dylan, you really screwed this up with Sophie's family. Fix it. Dad, this is getting out of hand. Just apologize and let's move on." I didn't reply. Because it wasn't about the chair. It wasn't even about the check. It was about everything before, all the years I'd been treated like the fallback guy. The emergency contact. The free Uber. The guy who always picked up the tab and never asked why no one offered to split it. And now that I'd finally said no, they didn't know what to do with me. What made it worse, or maybe better, depending on how you look at it, was the fact that Sophie's dad. He wasn't the type of guy to forget being embarrassed. From what I heard through one of Dylan's old friends, a guy named Trent, who's always been more decent to me than most, Mr. Lawson absolutely lost it the night after the dinner. Apparently, he'd footed the bill for Sophie's private school, helped her get her marketing business off the ground, and had gone out of his way to make this engagement period as smooth and polished as possible. Then he finds out that Dylan's side of the family lied about who paid for the venue, disrespected one of their own, and on top of that, left him stuck with half the bar tab when I refused to cover the rest. Trent said that at brunch the next morning, Mr. Lawson muttered something like, "If that's how they treat their own blood, what happens when you marry into it?" Yikes. The fallout hit Dylan like a truck. Suddenly the wedding plans were on ice. Sophie went back to her condo to clear her head. And all the Pinterest boards disappeared like they'd never existed. Mom, scrambling to contain the damage, sent me an email. Not a text. Not a voicemail. An email. Subject line, please. The message itself? 5 long paragraphs of sugary guilt dressing. She wrote that she never meant to hurt me, that she didn't realize I'd felt so excluded, and that it would mean so much to the family if I could just sit down with Dylan and work things through. But not once did she say, "I'm sorry." Instead, it was full of soft dodges. "We didn't know, you misunderstood, let's not throw away everything we've built over one silly night." That last line? It stuck with me. What exactly had we built? Was it the bond, where I drove 3 hours on Christmas Eve with a trunk full of gifts because Mom said Dylan was too stressed to shop for anyone? Or maybe the time I canceled my trip to Spain because Dad needed surgery and they couldn't afford in-home care? Or was it when I co-signed for their second car without blinking, The same card Dylan borrowed and never gave back? I let the email sit there, unread after that first pass. I didn't respond. 2 days later, I got a call from my Aunt Linda, Mom's sister. That surprised me. She's not exactly warm or touchy-feely. She's a sharp woman, ran her own interior design firm, always had that cool, judgmental energy like she was quietly measuring your worth every time you opened your mouth. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. "Sam," she said right away. "I heard about the dinner." "Of course you did," I replied, trying not to sound too bitter. "I'm not calling to scold you," she said quickly. "I just wanted to say, good." That stopped me cold. "It's about time someone shook the tree," she added with a sigh. I didn't know what to say. "Look," she went on, "I know how your parents operate. Always acting like nothing's wrong, always pretending things are fine." She paused. "But they've leaned on you too hard, for too long. And Dylan? He's always gotten away with treating you like a background character." I was quiet for a beat. "Thanks," I said. "That means more than you probably think. So why now?" I asked her. She didn't hesitate. "Because now the Whitakers are involved," she said, voice dry. "And your mom's panicking. She called me yesterday and asked if I'd tried to talk some sense into you." I raised an eyebrow. "And what did you say?" "I told her you didn't need sense. You needed space. And maybe it's time they figured out how to stand on their own for once, without using you as scaffolding." That was the first moment I felt truly seen by someone in my family. Not as a backup plan. Not as a bank account. Not as someone they could guilt into doing the hard stuff. Just as a person. Later that night, Dylan texted me. It was as subtle as a brick. "Dylan, bro, Sophie's dad just canceled the deposit on the wedding venue. Said we're not aligned in values. Fix this." Not, "Can you help me?" Not, "I'm sorry. Just fix this." And that's when it really hit me. He still didn't get it. He still thought I was some kind of utility. A switch to flip when things got tough. A walking credit line. So that night, I finally decided to fix something, but not the way he meant. I logged into the shared bank account I'd opened for him a year back, when he was between jobs and needed a place to park his direct deposit. It had lingered forgotten, with his gym membership and Spotify still linked to it. There wasn't a ton left, just a couple $1,000s. But it was mine, money I'd left untouched out of some vague sense of brotherly obligation. I quietly transferred the remaining balance to a private savings account I'd opened. Then I called the bank and closed the joint line completely. The next morning, Dylan called me 4 times in a row. When I finally picked up, his voice was panicked. "Dude, what did you do?" I stayed quiet. "Bro, I've got a date with Sophie tonight. I was gonna take her to that sushi place she likes, and now my card's bouncing. It says the account doesn't exist." "I know," I said evenly. "I closed it." "You what? You can't just." "I can't," I said calmly. "And I did. You told me I wasn't family, remember? You don't get to use my money if I'm not even allowed at the damn table." He stammered for a second, then shifted into his usual tactic. "Come on, man. Don't do this. You're jealous. Admit it. You've always hated that I got the attention. And now you're just throwing a tantrum because Sophie's dad took my side." I actually laughed. Out loud. "Oh, Dylan," I said. "You really think he's on your side?" Silence. Then I added, "Don't worry, man. You'll land on your feet. You always do. Maybe ask Mom to open another credit card in your name." I paused. "Or better yet, maybe Sophie's dad can finally teach you how to stand on your own." And then I hung up. I don't know what he did after that. Probably called Mom. Maybe paced his apartment. But a few hours later my phone buzzed again. This time, not from Dylan. It was an email. From Sophie. Subject line, "I think we need to talk." I stared at it for a while before opening it. That title, "I think we need to talk," it felt heavy. Like it was carrying the weight of something bigger than either of us really knew how to handle. Still, curiosity and a strange pull for closure made me click it open. It was longer than I expected. Thoughtful, but clearly written by someone who was unraveling a bit. Still polite. Still composed. But something under the surface was cracking. She started by acknowledging how awkward the dinner had been. Said she hadn't truly noticed how I was being treated until it all blew up. "I was so focused on planning the perfect night," she wrote. "I didn't stop to see the whole picture." Sophie said her dad had been livid. And not just because of the money, though that certainly didn't help, but because of the principle of it. "If they can publicly humiliate the person who financially and emotionally made that entire night happen," she wrote, "then I have to seriously reconsider the family I'm about to marry into." She didn't sugarcoat anything. She told me Dylan had tried to brush it all off, saying it was a minor misunderstanding. But once her dad got a detailed receipt from the restaurant, he'd asked the manager for a full breakdown. The cracks started showing. The lies unraveled fast. Dylan told her I'd insisted on paying. That I'd chosen to sit at a side table because I was shy and introverted. That I left early because of some sudden work emergency. But then Sophie did what I honestly didn't expect. She called the restaurant herself and talked to the waiter. And just like that, the whole story fell apart. Then came the part that actually made me pause. I ended the engagement last night, she wrote. I blinked. She explained that it wasn't just about the dinner. That night had just pulled back the curtain on a lot of things she'd overlooked before. The casual entitlement. The way Dylan spoke about me when I wasn't around. The way he dismissed her feelings anytime she raised a concern. He kept telling me you were overreacting, she said. But honestly, you were the only one in that room who carried yourself with dignity. She ended the email simply. I'm not writing this to stir anything up or drag you into drama. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I read that email over and over. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I wasn't used to being believed. The next few weeks were quiet. Oddly quiet. The family group chat went dead. Dylan tried calling me twice more. I ignored both. Then he stopped. Word got around that he'd moved back in with our parents. Sophie had returned the ring. Her father sent formal cancellation notices to the venue and vendors. A few of Dylan's so-called friends disappeared too, probably the ones clinging to Sophie's business contacts. I thought that was the end of it. That things would just fade into silence. But then, one Sunday morning, I heard a knock at my door. It was my mom. She stood there on my front porch, wearing a long cardigan, holding a container of lasagna like it was some kind of white flag. Her eyes were puffy, makeup faded. I didn't say anything. Just opened the door a crack and waited. I brought you dinner, she said quietly. I didn't take it. I just want to talk, she added. No excuses. That part? That part caught me off guard. So I let her in. She sat down at my kitchen table like she used to when I was a kid, nervous fingers twisting together, forced smile trying to find its shape. But this time? No deflections. No. You're tired. No. He didn't mean it. She cleared her throat. I owe you an apology. I crossed my arms. Just one? Her face tightened for a second, then she nodded. Fair. Probably more than one. She took a breath. I didn't see it. Not because it wasn't there, but because I didn't want to see it. Dylan's always been loud. He takes up space. And you never asked for anything. You just did. You took care of things. You showed up. And somewhere along the way, we started treating you like a safety net. She paused. Something we assumed would always be there. That's the thing about safety nets, I said quietly. No one looks at them when they're climbing. Only when they're falling. Her lip trembled. She looked down at her hands. Your father and I, we were wrong. We let Dylan get away with too much. We let him treat you like you didn't matter. I didn't say anything. Just listened. I know lasagna and an apology can't fix everything. But I wanted you to know, I see it now. And I'm sorry. I watched her for a long moment. For the first time in my life, she wasn't dodging. She wasn't defending Dylan. She wasn't telling me to calm down or let it go. She was just there. Owning it. I gave her a slow nod. Thank you. We didn't talk much after that. She left the lasagna on the counter. I walked her to the door. She didn't ask me to forgive Dylan. Didn't ask me to call him. She just said, take care of yourself. And drove away. Things didn't magically fix themselves after that. But they didn't get worse either. My parents started messaging me individually instead of lumping me into the group chat. Their messages were shorter. More thoughtful. More respectful. My mom invited me to Thanksgiving. Only if you feel up to it, she said. I haven't decided if I'll go. From what I've heard, Dylan's working part-time at some startup he hates. Still living rent-free. Probably avoiding mirrors. He hasn't reached out again. And I'm okay with that. As for me, I've started taking back my time. I finally went on that postponed trip to Spain. Bought myself a pair of noise-canceling headphones I'd been eyeing for months. I started reading books on boundaries, on family dynamics, on quiet strength. I even started seeing a therapist. Not because I was broken, but because I realized healing doesn't happen when you wait around for someone else to say, I'm sorry. It happens when you look at yourself in the mirror and say, you deserve better. And you gave it to yourself. So no, I didn't pay the bill that night. But I finally collected on a debt that had been building for years. And for the first time in my life, I'm not sitting next to the trash can. I'm at my own table. And this table? It's enough.